and welcome to another episode of the podcast, Confessions of a Nerdy Bible College Student. I'm your host, Luc Reed, and as always, alongside me, my lovely co-host, Gwen Smith.
Good even and 20, dear friends.
If you've been following us at all on social media, you know that last week we finally launched the podcast. And if you're new to the show this week, we highly recommend going and checking out our previous episodes. We've had some really great conversations. This week, we are planning on talking about politics, but due to some scheduling conflicts, we are instead taking a topic from a fan of the show, and actually have that fan on with us tonight, our good friend Benjamin Pass.
Hello.
As our way of introducing our guest, we'll start out with our usual questions. So Ben, where did you grow up?
Well, for me, that's a bit of a difficult question, as my father was a pastor, and we ended up traveling over, well, quite a few different places. We spent 4 years in Cleveland, Tennessee, when my father went to Lee University. We spent the majority of my childhood on South Shore, Nova Scotia, so that is home to me, but
Yeah.
But again, hard to say exactly where you grew up.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when did you discover that you were a nerd?
It's a bit hard for me to define when I started loving these nerdy things, because I thought that everyone did. I was raised on Star Trek and Star Wars, and I thought everyone loved it.
Yeah.
For me, I remember first time I watched Star Wars, I was 4 or 5, and my mom sat my brother and I down on the couch and started putting a movie into the VCR, and we asked her, well, what is this? And she said, you'll see, you'll like it. And, well, the rest was history.
Yeah.
So then it just became a matter of finding out that not everyone was willing to admit that they liked these things.
Yeah, that's a hard reality. So when did you become a Christian?
That one's not as hard to define.
Okay.
I was 5 years old, and it's still a very clear memory. I was actually with my mother in the laundry room in the apartments that we were in while my dad was in Bible college, and I told her, I want to be a Christian. And thankfully, she wasn't one of those kinds like seems popular of, oh, okay, dear, that's good. But she started grilling me. It's like, okay, well, what do you believe about this? What do you believe about this? Why do you want to be a Christian? And once I had answered her to her satisfaction, she said, okay, then let's pray, and led me to the Lord. But it was a matter of, you need to know what it is you're signing up for.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. And what made you decide to come to Kingswood?
Initially, if I'm being honest, it was the fact that I had family here and the fact that it's only 6 hours away from home. The fact that it is close. Now, I stayed at Kingswood because of some of the friends that I've made, because of, Dr. Gavel, head of the theology department. I mean, you start speaking with Dr. Gavel and, you just know that you're with a kindred spirit who loves to learn and loves to discuss the Word of God. So that was a great encouragement for me. And then after having come here, I felt some confirmation and felt some pretty clear calling.
Excellent. All right, great. So now that we know a little bit more about you, Ben, we've got our weekly question. How have you been doing as far as being nerdy this week?
Well, I always read a lot, but I've been recently going back and rereading the early issues of Green Lantern and early Action Comics with the appearances of Superman.
Oh, awesome.
I have a reprint of the first appearance of Superman.
Wow.
So I've been going back and looking at those recently, and along with my usual reading. Went to see Doctor Strange, and that was interesting. First time sitting in one of those D boxes where the seats move side to side through the action scenes.
Oh, wow, really? Wow.
Oh, yes.
That's intense, yeah.
Oh, yes. So whenever the camera shifts, even if it's around a corner, your chair moves along with it. So definitely a new experience.
Yeah, and where was that?
That was in Moncton.
Oh, really?
On Trinity Drive.
Oh, okay. Huh. Wow, I'll have to check that out. What about you, Gwen?
This week, because the new Pokemon games are coming out this week, I've been brushing up on my Pokemon knowledge and learning some of the new Pokemon that have been released.
Yeah.
Or been revealed over the course of the past couple of months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it was a sad day the other day because I was sitting in class and my roommate Brandon tells me that there's a Pikachu in the classroom. And I whip out Pokemon Go and I'm out of Pokeballs. And I don't have a Pikachu yet. It was so sad.
Oh
I screenshotted it and everything, so that was really sad. This week mostly has just been focused on the podcast, getting that up and ready and promoting that everywhere. Just making sure we've got that up. I watched the new Independence Day movie for a second time, which I thought was good because I felt like I caught a lot of things I didn't catch the first time. So that was interesting. And then I watched the claymation movie Kubo for the first time, and I thought it was an excellent movie. I thought it was really well done, really well written. It's kind of sad, but it ends in a way, I don't want to spoil it, but it ends in such a way that it's resolved kind of thing. So, but it's really good, and I would definitely suggest it. So now we've got the topic of the show, which Ben gave us the idea for, just like you as a listener can do by following us on Facebook and Twitter and leaving us a comment. This week, we're talking about books. So Ben, give us a brief history.
All right. Now, this is something which obviously spans a very long time.
Yeah.
Generally agreed that the first book in the modern sense of a novel, of a story which follows someone, would be the 18th century BC tale, the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Wow.
And in case you've not read it, or at least read portions of it, massive tale which spans several years within the universe, where Gilgamesh is at times placed with trials in front of him by the gods, at other times set upon by other foes, and just very interesting ancient reading. Now, in the modern sense of pages being bound into a book form, undoubtedly they're Christian and religious texts. Now, in between those two times, I mean, Epic of Gilgamesh being written on clay tablets. Later on, of course, you have papyrus and
the Egyptians.
Yes, and rice paper with Asian countries and scrolls, eventually going into books. Of course, for many, many years, you have everything handwritten in painstaking detail before you have the invention of the printing press. There's even one Bible known colloquially as the Devil's Bible, because of a large 2-page drawing of some sort of diabolic force in the center of it.
Oh, wow.
And I can't remember the dimensions exactly, so I may get the dimensions wrong, but it's something like 3 feet tall and 2 feet deep, and written by a single monk over a space of something like 20 years.
Wow.
By hand, containing all the knowledge he could find, both scriptural, cultural, medical, everything, into this one book. Then, of course, you get to the printing press, the idea that you can very quickly, comparatively, put these words on the page, get them out to the general public. And, of course, now it's devolved to the point where people are writing books that shouldn't really be written. You have the... you just go to the book section of Walmart and you see things that no one in their right mind would ever read, but they get sold anyway.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. All right, so we can move on to start talking about our favorite and most influential books. Gwen, do you want to start?
I can start. I'm a little odd. I grew up reading a lot of the classic stuff. Like, I've always loved Shakespeare and Dickens. I remember reading Romeo and Juliet probably every year since I was 14. Wow. I don't know why. I really love the Shakespearean language, so I love reading Shakespeare. Also liked George Orwell, like Animal Farm and 1984.
Oh, yeah.
Those were really big books for me to read, especially when I was taking my government class in high school. I don't know. I read way too many books to pick a favorite.
Yeah. That's true. Ben?
For me, favorite books, most influential books. There's a particular series. I'm trying to go for a little bit more obscure here, by Russell Kirkpatrick, called the Right Hand of God series.
Oh, okay.
And 3-book series, very interesting medieval fantasy written by a Christian with heavy Christian overtones. Of course, can't possibly go without mentioning Chronicles of Narnia, The Lord of the Rings, entire mythos. I mean, it's far more than just the trilogy and The Hobbit. If you haven't read the Silmarillion, then you're missing out on incredible amount of mythos, but also Tolkien's creation account. Beautiful. So good. Beautiful.
Yeah. For me, interestingly enough, it took me a while to get into reading, and then once I got into it, probably when I was in about 3rd grade, I'd say, I read nonstop. But the one book probably that has always kind of been my favorite would probably be Louis Satcher's Holes. I've read that book probably 20 times. It's my favorite book for whatever reason. I don't know why I love it so much, but I just really enjoy the story. I actually watched the movie first and then found out there was a book. And so I read the book, and I have read it so many times. And of course, Lewis and Tolkien and another plug. The Lemony Snicket books, A Series of Unfortunate Events.
Oh, those were good.
Those are so good. And actually, going back real quick for a moment, the things I've been nerding about this week, I saw the trailer for the new Series of Unfortunate Events series that they're going to be putting on Netflix in January. I'm so excited. Oh, man. Yeah, that's going to be fun. So, excited about that. We also got a few comments on Facebook about some of our friends' favorite books and most influential books. We've got Ryan Genereaux with the comment, 1984 by George Orwell, like Gwen mentioned. And then another friend, Anthony Reno, gave us quite a list. His influential books were Fahrenheit 451, which I've never actually read, but I've heard of it.
That's very good.
Yeah. The Time Machine by H.G. Wells.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I've heard of that one. I haven't read that one either.
What is wrong with you?
I know. Yeah, it's school. I've been reading textbooks.
There's always time to read Roddenberry and Wells.
We've got The Bridge of San Luis Rey by Thornton Wilder. I haven't heard of that one. Screw Tape Letters and Mere Christianity by Lewis. And then he said, as far as favorite, The Hobbit, J.R.R. Tolkien, but he dislikes the movies.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they give a good representation for the most part, but there's definitely some issues there.
Yes.
There's a reason why the fans aren't too pleased.
Well, I think it's far enough removed now that you don't have to give too many spoiler alerts, but when you have Smaug sweeping down onto the city at the end of the second movie, it's like, okay, how are you going to fit really anything into the third?
Yeah, that was my problem too. And the other problem I had, I mean, even though it wasn't that big of a deal, was the name change for the third one from There and Back Again to the Battle of Five Armies. I was so upset when I heard that they changed the name. But, I mean, it is what it is.
At this point, all we can hope for is that Jackson does start working on the Silmarillion.
Well, apparently they won't let him. Apparently, Tolkien's stepson or something like that. So someone related to Tolkien won't let Jackson touch any more of the works. But apparently he's doing some kind of like steampunk London movie soon.
Interesting.
I think it's called I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. I saw an article about it a few weeks ago. But yeah, so I figured we would kind of wrap up the conversation by talking, we've been talking about books, but now moving on to the topic of the paper book versus the machine book, because that's become a big thing just within the past, 10-ish years, where, you can have a device that has millions of books on it. You don't even need to have a library or anything. So what are your guys' thoughts?
Well, as for me, nothing can ever fully replace a paper book. There's something about the tactile feel, there's something about the smell of a book, and it just helps with the entire transporting yourself into another's shoes and into another world and another situation.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you can use e-readers to access a wide variety of books that you otherwise wouldn't be able to, and generally at a lesser price if you want to learn more about a genre or about a particular author. So there are certainly benefits to the machine, but I have 6 foot tall bookcases bowing underneath the weight of my books. Paper is my favorite.
Yeah, definitely. Gwen?
I'm in agreement that there's nothing that can replace like just turning the pages and smelling the pages. There's nothing that can replace just having a book. And I mean, being able to say that you have a library full of books, just you have a really good feeling from that. But at the same time, I live in a really small house, and obviously I live in JP, so it's a small dorm space. So it's nice to be able to have a large library, quote unquote, that's just on a device.
Yeah.
But I'm in agreement that paper is my favorite.
Yeah, definitely. They both have their own advantages and disadvantages. I was thinking when I was writing the script for this episode and everything that it would be interesting if within the next few years, rather than completely going electronic, although that would probably be the cheaper route, but making it so that we can store books easier, like a way so that we can the thought that was actually coming to mind was in the TV show Jimmy Neutron on Nickelodeon, he had this cube and he could put all of his inventions in this little cube, and I thought if we had something like that would solve all of our problems. We could just put a whole library in a cube.
Okay, so we need a bookcase of holding.
Yeah, basically a bookcase of holding, yeah, something like that. Or like even if we could perfect some kind of like shrink and growth ray, so we could like shrink the books, put them on a bookshelf, and then when we want to read something, we just, make it big again kind of thing.
Yeah.
So...
Or even less practical, just get your hands on a TARDIS and then you can have however many libraries you want.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. That would be nice. Yeah. Well, I think that's just about all the time we have for tonight. Thank you so much for listening to us. And just remember to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com//CNBCS podcast, Twitter at CNBCS podcast, and Instagram, so you can see what we're up to, and you can leave comments, thoughts, and opinions. Again, this podcast is not a product of Kingswood University. It is an independent project coming from the students as we finish our education and work to become leaders in the church. Next week, we'll have another topic, someone else to hang out with, and all that fun stuff. Until then, I'm Luc Reed.
I'm Gwen Smith.
And I'm Ben Pass.
And this is CNBCS. Stay nerdy, dive into the Word, and have a blessed week.